Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the ACE podcast. Booyah. Here, what we do is explore the self-employed creative life, how you can do your best work, how you can chart your own path and make it as a solopreneur. I was so excited to get this next guest on the show. Her name is Elaine Pofeldt. She's an independent journalist with a long and storied career writing for publications like Forbes, Fortune, Fast Company, and she's been writing about small business entrepreneurship and careers for a long time. And I was excited to have Elaine on the show for a number of reasons. I mean, one, as an aspiring writer myself, I just wanted to talk to another writer and how she's made her career and how she got her start and how she started freelancing in 2007, with 3 children at the time. From another perspective, I wanted to know how to best pitch to get covered, to get published. And so Elaine covers that in this episode. She gives a lot of great tips for how to think about approaching editors and journalists who work for these major publications and how to make their job easier. So stay tuned for that. And at the end of the conversation, we talk about writing a book and the challenges that come with that and what us aspiring authors should think about. I hope you enjoy this episode of ACE. And remember, you can find all episodes of this podcast at upstartist.tv/ACE. I've been writing a lot in the blog too, so upstartist.tv/blog. Sign up, get on our email list, and let's get to my conversation with Elaine Pofeldt. I am honored to have our next guest on the ACE podcast. She is an independent journalist who has written about small business, entrepreneurship, and careers for top business publications like Forbes, Fortune, and Fast Company. And her book, The $1 Million One-Person Business, explores how entrepreneurs are scaling to $1 million in revenue prior to hiring employees. She's covered this trend for many years, and she is writing a new book called Tiny Business, Big Money, which is to be published in fall 2022. Elaine Pofeldt, welcome to the ACE podcast. I'm so honored to have you on the show, and I'm so glad you wrote back when I asked you. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you, Darren. I'm so glad you wrote to me. I was really glad to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the best parts of hosting a podcast when you reach out to an author of a book, someone who covers the space, who's an authority in the space, and they reply right away. And you're like, oh my gosh, you replied. That's fantastic. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. Elaine, I thought we could break down our conversation into 3 parts. 1 would be covering your story. I want to hear about you. 2, how we can get more media coverage as solopreneurs, because you have extensive experience in the space in many different roles. And finally, perhaps asking some more difficult questions about one-person, $1 million businesses, if we still have time.
Absolutely.
So first, your story, Elaine. I want to leave this kind of open-ended. Can you tell me about your career as a journalist, freelancer, entrepreneur, and what kind of led you to write the $1 million one-person business book?
Sure. Well, I'll give you the high level to avoid boring everybody. I was always one of those kids that loved writing. I started writing stories when I was in kindergarten, and I never really stopped. I was the editor of my high school newspaper. I was the arts and entertainment editor at the Yale Daily News. And after I graduated, I was an English major. I worked at small newspapers for about 7 or 8 years. And I was doing all kinds of things, covering fires. I was the City Hall reporter in Jersey City, New Jersey for a while. And then after a number of years of that, I started to get tired of writing about bad news all the time. It sort of gets to you after a while. And I wanted to do something light and fun. So somehow I talked myself into a job as a fashion editor at Women's Wear Daily. I always enjoyed fashion, but I really didn't have any particular expertise in it. And so I was a fashion features editor there for a little while. And what I found was that that world was fun, but I didn't see it as having a lasting hold on me. But I did find that I was very interested in the business side of the fashion businesses. I was actually friends with a designer named Shampal Saraman, who is from Thailand. And I saw all the challenges on the business side for very talented and creative entrepreneurs and how important that was. So when I got an opportunity to join Success Magazine, which is about entrepreneurship, I thought, wow, I'm really interested in this. I worked there for a while. At one point, I was acting editor of the magazine. And then the magazine folded. And I wound up, my first stint of freelancing was about 4 months during that period when the magazine had folded. And I took a tiny freelance assignment. I think it paid $150 for this startup site at Time Inc. called Fortune Small Business Online. I forget what the story even was. I think it had to do with venture capitalists and what they're looking for. I turned in the piece, and a different editor responded to my email, and he said that Cheryl, the editor, had left, and did I know anybody who would be interested in that position, editing the website? And this was around 1999. The web was still not the dominant way of the media expressing itself. So I thought this might be a good opportunity to learn something new. So I said, well, I would be interested in it. And so I came in for an interview, and then I wound up becoming the editor. And it was just me and one other person. At that time, there was a web producer whose whole job was to post the story. Like we'd have one story a day or maybe two, and that was her job. And then I would edit. That's how cumbersome the websites were at that time. And so we built it up and got it to about 700,000 or 800,000 page views a month. And then I always had a love of long form journalism. And so I had an opportunity to go over to Fortune Small Business Magazine and do longer features. So I moved over there for 4 years. And then towards the end of that time, they wanted to bring me back to the website because it had sort of changed hands within the company, and they wanted to build the traffic up some more. And for whatever reason, I'm not a techie at all, but I'm very good at building traffic. I was able to get it to 2 to 5 million page views a month when I came back. It was a little different at that point because now we had social media. We had other ways of driving organic traffic. So then in the meantime, I wound up starting a family. I was married, and in 2003, I had twins who were premature. They were in the hospital in the NICU for 3 months. And so I worked out a work from home arrangement so that I could stretch out my maternity leave and go to the hospital every day. I was living in Jersey City, New Jersey at the time, and they were at New York Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. And so then I had another baby, their little sister, about 2 years after that. At that point, I started to feel like I liked the whole working from home thing. Although I did have a full-time career, I liked being able to go to the park at lunchtime with my kids, or the workday started at 10. So I had the whole morning with my children before work started, and I didn't have any commute. And so by the time the older girls were about maybe almost 4 years old, I started to feel like I was ready to make a transition. And then I became a freelancer in 2007. And that was when I started my business. And I didn't know if it was going to be permanent or not. But I found that I loved it. I was working with a lot of the same people. Some of my first clients were from Time Inc., actually. And so some of the clients I still work with are people from that period of my life. And then I wound up diversifying, and I found that I actually liked working for other publications in the industry too, because sometimes one publication isn't interested in a given topic, and maybe another one will be, which brings us to the one-person business. So one of the things that I started doing as a freelancer, I think it was about 2011 or 2012, was blogging for Forbes. And at that time, I don't think I had much blogging experience, so I thought it was a good opportunity to learn it. And over time, one of my editors, Tom Post, noticed that I was writing a lot about one-person businesses and freelancing. And it was partly just because I was interested in, what are the best practices. And
yeah, you're living that life too.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and no one really was covering it much except in a negative way. It was always like the gig economy exploiting people, but I had a different perspective. And I think here's where diversity comes into play. Where as a woman with small children, I did not feel exploited by freelancing. I felt like the structures of a traditional workplace worked against me because I needed more flexibility, even though I have to say Time Inc. was the most flexible employer you could imagine. They were so wonderful. I worked from home 4 out of 5 days a week, but I saw even with something that flexible, there were things that would come up with a family, right? Like when you have 3 kids, now I have 4 kids actually, say one kid gets the flu, right? They don't all get the flu on the same day. So if you need to take time off for one sick child, then 5 days later, the other one gets the flu. Well, you can't say to that child, well, take care of your fever on your own. I have to work because one child in the family already got sick. But that's kind of the conundrum that you're in. So as a freelancer, you don't have to discuss it with anyone. You just do what you have to do. Like if you do your work at midnight or whatever, as long as you make your deadlines, then it's no one's business what you're doing to manage your family. So I felt like the gig economy is actually empowering for me as a woman. And I could see where for a lot of different people, it is empowering for different reasons. It could be because they just want the flexibility to pursue a sport or to travel. It could be because they have a disability and they need to make certain accommodations that are harder to make in a physical workplace. There's any number of reasons why it's advantageous for people to be self-employed. And I felt like that wasn't really being discussed. It was just that this assumption that everybody wanted a traditional job and wanted to be on payroll, and that was the only acceptable way to work in which you were not being exploited. And there is exploitation for sure in the gig economy, but I also felt like if you get really proficient at your craft, whatever it is, you have negotiating power. So in a way, the onus is on you. If you become really good at what you want to sell and you build a good reputation, then you don't have to accept substandard pay or substandard working conditions. You just say no and find someone who will pay you. So anyhow, I start writing about the one-person business. And then one day I was looking for an idea. I write the 5 blog posts a month for Forbes, and I saw these statistics that the Census Bureau puts out. They're called the non-employer statistics. And just the name kind of made me mad, because when you call someone a non-entity, non-employer, like you're negating them or saying they didn't do something. And they were basically one-person businesses. Sometimes they're partnerships or small teams, like a startup before it has hired employees. Basically, they have no W-2s. And what I noticed was a number of them were getting to 1 million in revenue. Now, it's a tiny percentage, right? Even now, the number got to over 40,000 out of about 28 million small businesses, of which about 26 million are non-employer firms. So these are the Olympic athletes of the one-person business. They really are exceptional business people. But I felt like we can learn from them, right? Because even if we don't personally need to get to 1 million in revenue or want to put in the time and effort that it takes, if you're at 60,000 and you want to get to 150,000, there are things you can learn from their best practices and apply without going all the way. The same way you could see an Olympic athlete training and say, well, I'm not going to really train like Michael Phelps does in swimming. I don't have the time or the inclination to do that. But you know what? He does do these techniques that when I do my half an hour in the pool 3 times a week, I'm going to do, because it makes me a better swimmer and allows me to get more out of what I am doing. And that was my perspective. So I wrote a post about the statistics, and I was really surprised it went viral. I didn't have any stories in it because I didn't know who the entrepreneurs were, and you cannot find out from the Census Bureau. People started writing to me and saying, Elaine, this was a cliffhanger. You didn't tell us who they are or what they're really doing. You just said they're doing retail or whatever it was. So I wrote to the readers. I started doing a series of posts on like one-person businesses and consulting or whatever it might be. And over a year, 5 of them wrote to me. Some people wrote to me and they didn't want to be in the article because basically they didn't want to buy drinks for everyone around them for the rest of their life, because people don't realize a $1 million business doesn't mean you take home 1 million. That's before taxes, before expenses, before everything else. But they just didn't want that published. So these folks were more transparent. And so they were people like Alan Walton, who runs Spy Guy, an online nanny camera store. Rachel Charlupski, she runs this babysitting company that has locations all over the country, and the babysitters are contractors. And there was someone who wrote a newsletter for private wealth clients. There was a high ticket newsletter. Dan Mezeritsky, who is a fitness trainer, who was licensing out his fitness training methodologies, etc. So that one went really viral. So I realized people were very interested in the subject. And I started writing a series of posts. Every time I found one of these people, usually they found me because they're a needle in a haystack, I would profile them unless they were involved in certain types of businesses that seem like, come to my webinar and then I'll sell you this course on how to get rich, like that I wasn't interested in. I was more interested in, a nutritionist or a consultant or an accountant or a real estate investor, people that were doing things, just everyday types of businesses, but really maximizing them. And I eliminated the ones that I thought were out of reach for the average person. Like there's a whole category over 5 million, and they're mostly hedge funds. Well, how many people will start a hedge fund? So I just didn't think it was publicly that interesting, even though it is interesting to me what they're doing. It was beyond the scope of my work. So then an agent noticed the posts and she said, have you thought of doing a book? And it was kind of in the back of my head. And I actually was starting to ghostwrite books for other people at that time, but I hadn't gotten around to really taking action on it. So that was a good impetus. And then she sold the book to Random House and the book came out. So that's the story.
Wow, there's so much to unpack there. You were ahead of your time. I mean, through you jumping on opportunities that you found interesting to learn more about or circumstance to be freelancing since 2007. And I will link to your book and your Forbes column. I mean, it's prolific when I see that, like you said, you've written 5 posts a month since 2012. I mean, it's such a good resource for those of us who aspire to have high revenue generating businesses. So I'll link to both of those in the show notes. But I just kind of want to ask you, given your long history and love and passion for writing, how are you so prolific? I mean, just both writing, but also I saw you've been on 90 podcasts. So, how do you do this? I counted them.
Oh, you counted them? It's funny because my children work in my business. I have teenagers, and they just updated that page. So you must have the latest count. That's so funny. I'm a geek. I love talking about this subject. I really do. And when I find people that are really interested in the one-person business, I'm very interested in talking with them about it. I find there are different audiences that are not as familiar with it. So like I did one, the Martial Arts and Business podcast. I think he was in Romania. I don't want to say I'm a martial artist, but I've studied Taekwondo for about 8 years. I'm a 2nd degree black belt. I took that up with my daughter. So it was a community that I felt connected to. These were more fitness entrepreneurs, people like that. So if I find a community that I think might benefit from the book, then I will take part in the podcast. I had one that was I think he was a 13-year-old boy in Bulgaria, but I thought so many young people do not know about entrepreneurship. And I think especially in some of the Eastern Bloc countries, the information might not have flowed as freely as it would in the more capitalist countries, right? So I want to be somebody who facilitates the flow of information. Then people can do with it, what they will. People are tremendously creative and innovative, but I wasn't exposed to entrepreneurship when I was growing up. I have wonderful parents, but my dad was a civil servant. My mom was a secretary, and entrepreneurship just wasn't part of our family life. I didn't really know about it until I was a journalist, other than going to the local stores and things like that. But I never thought of it as a career option. I just never get tired of talking about it. Also, it's constantly evolving. Just seeing what some people are doing to make their businesses operate on a shoestring. I'll give you one example that just blows my mind. I heard from this young woman who runs a brand called Pink Colada. It's a bikini brand. She was a medical student in Australia, and she had $200 to start a business. She didn't have enough money to design. She wanted to do designing clothing, but she didn't have enough money to make a sample of a dress because of the amount of fabric. So she did have enough to do a bikini. So she designs this bikini. She finds a factory. that was an up-and-coming factory that was willing to take smaller orders. She takes one picture of the bikini, puts it on Instagram, and buys ads to drive traffic to it, and says, will you pre-order this bikini, to see if there was any interest in the market before she manufactured it. So then she gets like 1,000 orders for the bikini, has the money to manufacture it. The factory was happy to have the business. And that's been her whole business model. She's now expanded. She's like several $1 million in revenue, and she's expanded to the point beyond just being a one-person operation. But I thought, wow, what a great way to take the risk out of it. But it's not a way, if you grew up and went to business school, you wouldn't really be taught that as a way to test product market fit, right? She just did this intuitively. And I see this because my kids are ages 10 through 16. Digital natives, the way they do things is constantly evolving, like TikTok, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
They live in the world of TikTok. Somebody who's 25 probably doesn't, but these are teenagers. So I keep finding new ways to do things. Joey Healy, who has Joey Healy Eyebrow Studio, it's in Manhattan. His business was hit hard by the pandemic. He had to shut his doors. He has real estate on University Place near NYU, which, if folks are not familiar with Manhattan real estate, it's expensive. And he had been a one-person operation for a long time. Then he hired a team. Now he's got this huge overhead. And he said, what am I going to do? I can't sell the eyebrow styling that I normally do. But he had a sidelight of doing eyebrow makeup. And he had the makeup in a clean, dry basement. And he said, this is going to take me through the pandemic. So what did he do? He went on Instagram and TikTok, and he filmed these videos about how to do your eyebrows at home, because everyone's on Zoom calls, right? And people like, what do I do about my hair? I haven't had a haircut in weeks. And same with the brows. So every time he did this, if the makeup was relevant, he would mention it. He kept his one expense going for his publicist to get him into magazines. And I think he was on Good Morning America, teaching everybody how to do their eyebrows at home. And each time it was an opportunity to sell the makeup. And I thought, it really kind of went back to the Instagram and TikTok. He started building pickup for this, and now that's keeping the business going. He's probably opened his doors since I last spoke with him. I think the date was like the 16th in New York City. He wouldn't have been able to do that 10 years ago. That's what fascinates me. So I never get tired of talking about it, because it's such a fast evolving part of the business world.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you're covering it. And I mean, just one last personal question. Do you write every day? Like, do you have a certain time?
7 days a week. I do.
Okay.
I do.
Do you have like a certain schedule with that, or how does that? I'm just curious, as someone who's written that for her career, right? Like, how do you think about it or structure that?
Well, it is how I make a living. So it's tight. Like, it's different if you're doing, like, I used to write a lot of fiction, and that is a little harder for me to fit in. So I chip away at that. I've gotten back into it now recently, and I'm just chipping away one paragraph a day, which is really slow. But when you're writing all day to do other things, and you have 4 children who are home for the summer with no summer camps and things like that, you got to be creative. But I get up at 5 a.m. It has evolved constantly with the ages of my children, because there were times when, if I had a newborn, I could not get up at 5 a.m. because maybe I just went to sleep at 5 a.m. So you have to get enough sleep. I would find chunks of time to do it. And usually it would be first thing in the morning, because once you start getting on phone calls and things, it's very distracting. And as long as I did an hour and a half of writing every day, I could get a lot done. And I mean, there's some days where I've written 3 stories in one day, but that's not ideal.
In an hour and a half, or?
No, well, it depends, maybe like 500 word stories. But if you do things all the time and you know the subject, you get pretty proficient. That's not always possible. Some stories are more complex, require a lot more fact checking or things like that. But I think the more you practice anything, the more efficient you get, and the more you're able to keep it interesting for yourself too. Because if I was just writing the same small business articles over and over again, I would dread them, and then I wouldn't want to sit down and do the writing. But when I think about it, I'm like, wow, this is like super interesting what's going on with TikTok. I just find ways that I keep on staying interested in the topic. And so for anybody, like if you're a health writer or a travel writer, in some ways it's more efficient to just keep going over old ground. But I think if you can find ways to keep the conversation going and evolving, and also pay attention to the larger conversation in your subject matter, what are the other people saying about this?
Right.
What are the other writers saying about entrepreneurship? Then you can develop a point of view. So my point of view is different from a lot of people. I was part of that world of covering scalable startups, and I still cover them. But I feel like there are a lot of people covering that, and I can't add as much to the conversation on that as I can on the one-person business, because a lot of writers don't write about the one-person business and don't care about the one-person business, whereas I find it completely fascinating. And it's also the largest number of small businesses in the country and in the world.
Exactly.
And so
which is amazing to think about. Yeah.
It is. It's just millions of people that have these businesses who get almost no content written for them. They don't get the respect that they deserve, because it takes a lot of courage to start a one-person business. Most of us are raised, have jobs, and then there's this whole mentality like go big or go home. So it's like either you have a job or you go out and you create the next Facebook. Well, what if you don't want those two things? What if you care about having quality of life, but you still want to earn enough money that you can travel or save for retirement or put your kids through college? There's no reinforcement for that lifestyle choice. And yet I find these are the most amazing people. They are so happy. They're healthy. You can't generalize about every single person, obviously, but they've made a choice in favor of what they care about, which takes a huge amount of courage and integrity to do. And I want to be the one who recognizes it, because I really, really admire what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And as someone trying to live this life, it's empowering, as you mentioned at the beginning of our talk, and it's exciting and thrilling, but it is challenging in its own ways. And I hope we can come back to that at the end of the conversation. I do want to talk to you about how we can get more media coverage. Having, like you said, being an expert of building traffic and knowing the limitations of running your own business or being a freelancer. How can us time and resource strapped solopreneurs get more media coverage, get published?
Okay, this is a big topic. So I'm gonna give you the high level tips, because I do get pitched a lot. If you looked at my inbox,
I can't wait to hear these.
Emails just keep coming. I just have to keep deleting them. So one thing that's important is the subject line, right? What I would say is research the writers first. Google, if you're a solopreneur or one-person business, Google who writes about this. Don't pitch the people that don't write about it. Pitch the people that do. I'm not the only person who writes about it. There are people that write about this topic. So know who they are, and then put up a Google alert for their work so you know what they're covering lately and which publications they write for. You can pitch staff editors at publications, but generally the entrepreneurship publications have a bias towards scalable businesses. So it's harder to pitch a solo business unless it has a very extraordinary human interest story or a very extraordinary financial story. And in the subject line, you want to make it clear that you know what the person you're pitching writes about. So like if I see gig economy in a pitch, solopreneur, I pay attention because I do write about that. But if I see startup, that doesn't attract me as much because I'd need to know more specifics about it. Why are they pitching me a startup? Then in the pitch, very important, you've got to think about, why is the story useful for other people? Financials are important for pitching any top tier business publication. So if the business really isn't making any money, it doesn't have a very strong business story. Right? If it's a six-figure business or above, there is sort of a market for stories about six-figure freelancers, things like that. But if you want coverage, it's helpful to be willing to publish your revenue. A lot of people will balk at that. That takes you out of the running completely for any major business publication. So the time to start pitching is when you've built up the revenue at least to 6 figures. 7 figures is a little out of reach for the majority of small business owners. So I don't want to say you can't get coverage below that, because I do see people in the 100,000 to 999 range. But if you're under $1 million, then you want to think about, what makes this story really fascinating. It could be, if you're a doctor who came up with an invention because your child was sick or something like that, the human interest part of it, or you live in a really interesting part of the world, or you've been a digital nomad for the last 5 years. Usually other people are good judges of what's interesting about you. A lot of people are very modest and they don't realize their life is fascinating. So think about the things people ask you. Like if you go to a party, what do they always ask you about? It might not be the things that you think are interesting, but those are generally a clue to an editor would think is interesting. I would say keep the pitch very concise. The other thing is, if you do have a following, a lot of editors have traffic goals. They don't say this, but it's the truth. So if you have 96,000 Instagram followers like Joey Healy, mention it, because you're going to share the story on social media and help them get traffic. It's just the way the world works. So mention it. If you don't have much of a social media following, then I would recommend every day work on it. Doesn't mean you have to, be posing bathing suit on Instagram or that people don't want to do. You don't have to be that kind of influencer. There's plenty of influencers like that, but there are influencers who have a completely different persona. It doesn't have to be on Instagram. It could be all on LinkedIn. It could be on Twitter. Wherever it is, build it up. And it could be on multiple ones, but you want to show that you'll be a good partner in sharing the story. Some people feel like I shouldn't have to promote it. People should naturally go to it. Well, that's not the universe we live in. So if you actually want to pitch successfully, you want to bring your best game to the table. And so that's what I would recommend. The other thing is have a professional headshot done, because a lot of times they don't have a photo budget anymore. I remember the beautiful days when I was at Fortune Small Business Magazine, where you fly a photographer somewhere, and they'd be one of the best photographers in the country, if not the world, and they'd come and the person would look better than in any photograph ever taken in their life. They'd have a makeup artist there. It was wonderful, but that doesn't exist very much anymore. So invest in a photo and have it handy. What I would recommend is, I don't know if they have this all over the world, but there's a chain called Glamour Shots. They're not paying me to say this, but I have done this myself. It cost me like $200. You get to bring 3 outfits, and they do your hair and makeup. I don't know if they do that for the men, but for the women they did. And they let you change clothes. So you get about 12 professional headshots in all different clothes, different poses. So if people need it, you have it ready, and it's high quality.
Right.
And a bio ready too, because they might need a bio for some reason, and just have these things handy at all times. You never want to get back to a publication and say, can I have another week because I need to get a headshot done, because they move so quickly. They're on to the next thing next week. So I would say that might actually be the first thing you want to do. Commit to it. It doesn't cost that much money. There could be a local photographer in your town who can do it. But what I would recommend is, the professional styling, because it really makes a difference in terms of
so interesting.
Like in a magazine. Yeah, I loved it, because you sort of see on the video, I have hair that curls up in the humidity. So somebody foofing my hair the whole time. It was like the neatest it's ever been. And if it curled up a little, they straightened it back down again. And so for those of us that we don't have training in that type of thing, it's a confidence booster, and it's nice to have it. And you could do it like one corporate shot, maybe wear a suit or something more businessy, maybe one more casual one, and then one in between, so that you have some range of choices. If you have an interesting hobby, like you ride horses or something like that, and that's related to the story, you could also invest in having someone shoot you doing that interesting thing that you do, because that might be a selling point for the story, which, everything that makes you interesting makes the story interesting. So really take stock of that. And as I said, a lot of people are modest and humble, and they hate to self-promote, but look at it as a service, right?
Right.
You're making the story an enjoyable activity for the person to read and experience,
Right.
rather than self-promoting.
Yeah.
And with the social media too, one thing I will say is a lot of people, they feel like it's boastful to be on social media, but there's a way to do it that isn't boastful. Like if you have an opportunity, say you you had a speaking engagement, maybe it would be a Zoom speaking engagement. Now, focus on writing something about the host of the engagement, or the moderator or the other panelists. You don't write about yourself, because most people hate doing that. And then it's kind of annoying anyway, where people are always posting honored to be selected as blah, blah, like, there they go again, You don't want to be that
The
person.
The humble brag.
Yeah. I mean, highlight someone else that they should know about. Because I find with the podcasts, I meet fascinating people who are doing podcasts. They're always on the cutting edge of the trends. They're like even faster than journalists nowadays, because they're always talking to people. I like to introduce new podcasters to people on my LinkedIn, because they will actually listen. They're really looking for people who talk about the subject matter. So I would take that approach, be very other directed, and look for opportunities to shine a spotlight on people and information that's really useful to the people that you hope will be drawn to your business and drawn to you. And it will become sort of organic, I think. People start sending you things to share. I get a lot of people saying, I know you write a lot about solopreneurs. We're doing this event. Will you share it? And if I think it's a high quality event, I will share it. Or even an article that I think is relevant. I just shared the wonderful article in the New York Times about the challenges of working parents with online schooling during the pandemic. It was very nuanced. It was really well done. And I shared it, even though a lot of my followers would have work at home businesses, so they have a little more flexibility. The person who wrote it did too, and she was suffering. And so I thought, and I'm suffering too with this, because I have 4 kids doing online schooling. I thought it's a universal. We're all interested in this. We all have empathy for the schools and know how hard it was. And we're all wondering, what's going to happen in the fall. So I shared that and got a lot of comments on it. So it builds a little community around what you think about and talk about.
Those are such good tips, and I have so many more questions on. Well, let me ask you one question. You mentioned when you're pitching, first, when you pitch, you should never pitch to, say I'm pitching to Fast Company. If I don't know a person there, I shouldn't just send it to their submission page, right? Because I've actually done that.
I wouldn't recommend that. You never know. You could get lucky, but what I would do is try to see who the contributors are, and then reach out to them through social media. Like I get sometimes messages on Twitter, like a direct message from someone, or they usually do a tweet initially if I'm not following them. And then they say, I'd like to pitch you on a story. So then I write back, I have followed you. You could send me a direct message. And then I see what it is. And then at that point, I'll share my email address, because I also get these crazy, like, Bitcoin, blah, 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 and I don't want to give out my email address and be hacked. So I
exactly. Don't give it away. Don't give it away.
Yeah. Exactly.
And one last question there. You mentioned when you pitch your article to think about what content would be useful. Can you unpack like what you mean by useful?
Well, you want to look at where it's similar to being an entrepreneur. Where is the pain in the marketplace, but not where is the pain now? Kind of where is the pain heading,
Gotcha.
right? 6 months down the road, because they don't want to publish articles that are outdated by tomorrow, unless someone's covering the White House or something like that. But for what we are talking about, entrepreneurship, will this story have legs 6 months from now? So the online schooling, say you came up with a really innovative way to address this that we haven't heard about in all the other articles, so you'd want to see what else has been written. This would be a good thing to pitch right now, because there's going to be a lot of back to school coverage coming up. People are really not sure what's going to happen. They don't know if their children's schools are going to open. It has huge implications for the workplace, because what if all the working parents can't come in and the office is open, but they have young children. They cannot leave at home. They cannot get a babysitter because of COVID. So there's like many, many dimensions to that. You might have a solution to just the childcare part of that. Like maybe you're offering in-office childcare, or maybe you offer plexiglass dividers at the school, or whatever it is. If you have something that's really relevant to what people are experiencing now, and then think about the bigger areas of pain right now. Economic pain, right? We haven't had that for a long time. We had a booming economy, and now maybe we're going to have another stimulus package, but the $600 add-on to the unemployment in the U.S. is about to expire. People are worried. They're like, how am I going to pay my bills? And we're having a second wave of businesses closing. Some of them took the CARES Act funding. Some of them didn't. I just see this in my own community. We were chatting about this before. So then, there's going to be economic pain, and where are you providing a solution for that? There's also psychic pain, right? People are isolated. There have been a lot of articles about, finding balance and finding the silver lining and stuff. So it's like, how do you move that conversation forward to where people are going to be 3 to 6 months from now with that? What are the challenges they're facing? Maybe you break it down by different segments of society. Like people who have children who have been under lockdown since March. That's not good for children, but yet they're trying to do what's safe for their child. So how are they navigating this? Or do you have a solution for this? Some sort of socially distanced playdate solution, or for elderly people, or all the different sectors of people that are affected. Maybe they're affected differently because of their situation in life, or their age, or their health conditions, or whatever it may be, and pitch it based on that. It's always good, whatever you're doing, to show that you're already getting business results with it. So if you have a certain number of signups, or something sold out, or you had to add a second session because there was so much demand, or you got 1,000 letters in response to something you did, or 100 letters. Those things matter to a pitch, because an editor will say, oh, that people actually care about this.
Elaine, I only have you for a little while longer, so I want to cover one more topic, which is writing a book. You've written one, obviously. You're writing another one. Let me just first ask you the question of, is it worth it these days to write a book? It seems like there's less book readers, and people are spending more of their time on social media, or, consuming blogs, or even listening to audiobooks. I guess that still counts as a book, but I'd love to hear your thoughts there.
Well, you know what? I think historically, there's only been a certain percentage of people that read books. Other people learn different ways. It doesn't mean they don't want to learn. They just don't turn to books. One great thing that has happened is audiobooks. People that are more auditory learners are now consuming books in that way. And I think that's brought a whole bunch of new readers to book authors that maybe weren't reading before because they didn't have time to sit down with the book. And it's not because they don't love books. Like, I love books, but I have 4 children and I have a limited amount of time to read. So I read like 3 pages a night sometimes, and I fall asleep on the pillow, and that's all I can get done. It's different than when I was in college and I was reading 4 books a week. It's just, I had so much time then to read. I definitely think it's worth it because it does bring very interesting people into your life that writing articles and shorter things don't do. I have experienced this just from my book. Think about the 90 podcasters I met who are fascinating people because of the book. I would have never met them because of an article. I've done a lot of live events. I can't do them right now because of COVID, but those were amazing for me personally to get together under one roof with. The biggest one, I was a guest speaker. It was like 2,000 people, mostly in one-person businesses. But most of the ones I did were 200 or 300 people, where we'd have a panel of people from the book, and just seeing the chemistry in the room of the actual people in the book in front of an audience of people who are dreaming about doing this, or maybe are in certain stages of doing it, and how that ignites innovation and helps people stay motivated. Doing something that's hard to do in society was really powerful for me. And I don't think it would have, without a book as the catalyst. That's what I think a book is, a catalyst. I mean, you can write a book as a calling card for your business. If you have something that people are always asking you about over and over again, like you have a certain methodology for something, it can be useful to have it in book form. That's one reason to do it. But I think the larger reason to write a book is it's a magnet for people that care about the same things you do. And then the book, the people that react to the book help you to grow as a writer. So with the next book that I'm doing, Tiny Business, Big Money, that came out of conversations with some of the people I wrote about as I saw their business evolving, and also people that I met when I did those book events or who read the book and wrote to me. And they're saying, well, now I'm at the stage where I need to hire an admin. I'm past the one-person business stage, but they're very much like the one-person business. The business hasn't changed that much, except now there's other people in it who have to learn how the owner wants things done, right? And there's a whole level of communication and putting systems in place and running a more organized business. Like, okay, do they have to be an employee or can they still be a contractor? You don't want the labor department cracking down on you, right, if you misclassify them. So there's a lot of other things that go on, and how do you keep the original mojo of the business as you start doing this without quite scaling, right? Maybe you're adding like a handful of people, because by design, just like there's the tiny house movement, I think there's very much a tiny business movement. People don't say it, but it exists. People are just like, I want to keep this a small group so that I could still go bike riding or walk my dog, and I don't have to worry about my 200 employees. They just don't aspire to that. They aspire to a great lifestyle. And sometimes having the great lifestyle means just adding the one or two people so you don't have to do everything yourself. So I definitely think it's worth it, but the timing needs to be right. I look at it as being a very big deal, like having a baby, moving to another state, starting a new job. You wouldn't want to do a book the same year you're doing some other major life pursuit. I think you've got to pick the year you're going to do it, and then you commit. It's a year-long project. Usually, I have done a book for someone as a ghostwriter in 6 months, but that's a breakneck pace, and it doesn't allow your unconscious time to work on it. I am a book coach, by the way. I work with a lot of writers. The best way to do it is just chip away at it. Have an accountability partner. There are a number of book coaches. You could just have a friend who's more a bookish person, who will keep you honest and turn in the chapters to them, just so you have a deadline, because every writer needs deadlines. Otherwise, you become a perfectionist and you're like, I'll never be able to get this down. I'm going to wait till it's perfect, and then you never do it. So it's better to write it. You can always edit it, but chip away at it.
How do you make sure? Last question, I promise. How do you make sure that a book that takes a year or two to write is still going to be useful? Giving that. Everything you've told us about being useful, like producing useful content for your articles, right? A book, I feel like things can change so fast. So I'd love to hear, maybe a little behind the scenes how that works.
Well, you do have to update it close to publication to take into account whatever is going on in the world. So the $1 Million One-Person Business is coming out in paperback in January. And literally like 2 days ago, I was still updating it. And now they're sending me the galleys, right, as close to publication as they possibly can without messing up the publication, because so much happened. COVID happened, right? So then I had to update the business profiles with how these entrepreneurs reacted to COVID. And other changes in the news, you've got to kind of stay on top of it, which it takes a lot of work, but I have a lot of passion for it. I love talking to these entrepreneurs and finding out what Joey Healy did when his salon was shut down, because I learned a lot from it. So part of it is picking a book you're really interested in, and you will remain interested in, but you also have to think ahead and project, like, will this still be relevant? So with technologies, I do have some tech recommendations, but I've kept them a little bit more general. Or if I've mentioned specific ones, I don't mention many that are startups because they might not be around. I'll mention things that are, I think, longer lasting. so that if someone picks up the book, these places will not all be out of business, which would be disappointing.
Yeah.
You could also do it on a website. Like you could have kind of a living appendix where you say, for tech recommendations and just keep updating it. But I think reality being what it is, people forget to do it. And then people go to that website and it's not up to date. So I'd rather just opt to pick things that I think have a longer shelf life. And then there's always the risk, by the time the book comes out. I wrote that in the book. Things might have changed by the time the book comes out. You can put that caveat in there. If you're doing nonfiction, if it's fiction, it's like a whole other story. But for nonfiction, you do want to put in a caveat that, the world is changing quickly and there's things you can't predict. But that's also where the vetting comes. If you're doing case studies, you want to think about, what is this person's track record in general with all the things that they do? Do they stick with things, or will they have changed their mind and close the business in 6 months? That's not who you want in the book, because then the book is less useful and you don't have as much proof of concept of what you're writing about, right? If you're picking them as an example of something that you believe to be true and then they fold, then that's not good, right? So,
exactly.
So you want to pick the ones that really embody what you're trying to say.
Well, Elaine, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your journey to doing everything that you're doing now and the tips you gave us on how to get more media coverage, how to think about books. I had so many more questions about, a lot of the statistics that you mentioned, but maybe we could save that for the next time we have you on the show, about kind of the emotional challenges of running a one-person, $1 million business, or just any quote-unquote non-employer business. I think it's very challenging, but we can cover that in our next episode if I'm lucky enough to get you on. So I just want to thank you so much.
Love to do that. Yeah. I mean, just a quick tip on that is community, right? We can do a whole episode on it, but it comes down to other people. You don't want to be lonely in a one-person business. There are millions of us out, millions of people out there running micro businesses. Connect online, connect whatever way you can with other people on this same kind of journey, so that you aren't isolated among people that don't get what you're doing, and you get the reinforcement, because it is so hard. It's so hard to buck what everybody has programmed you to do, but it doesn't mean it's not valuable. You can be an ambassador of what you do and teach other people around you of what's possible, but you do need the reinforcement and strength of being around other people who intrinsically believe in doing this and see the value of it.
I agree with you 100%. Like, when I read the statistics in your book that the U.S. Census Bureau released, that there's 3 million non-employer firms making over $100K a year, I thought, wow. But then when you compare that number to, like you said, the total number of non-employer establishments, right? 26 million something. Then you realize, oh wait, that's only like 10% of people who are getting to that level, right? And as you said at the beginning,
it's like $45,000 ish. But part of it is some of these are side businesses. They don't tell you in the census statistics. A lot of people have side hustles where they have to file taxes. They say they drive Uber on the side. That isn't their full-time job. Maybe they do it for 10 hours a week. So that brings down the numbers. But to me, what's exciting is it's possible, right? There are people that
is so possible.
Are doing it. So we know there's 3 million that are over 100K. It tells us all that it's doable. I mean, that's a very achievable number. I think for almost anyone who's in a full-time business, it's a matter of figuring out your business model so that it works for both you and the customer. But it's very, very achievable. I'd be happy to come back on the show because we have in common, a lot to talk about. And I love what you're doing, Darren. It's really, you're part of that community, bringing people together and giving them that reinforcement. And I'm so excited to tell people about this podcast because people need it right now. They're more isolated than ever. And a lot of people are going to be starting one-person businesses now because they lost their jobs. And it's going to be so important to have guides who introduce them to new ideas and just give them that social reinforcement that they can do it. And you're doing that.
Well, thank you so much, Elaine. And please, if you want more tips and more frameworks for how to think about your one-person business, do read Elaine's book, The 1% person or $1 million one person business. I think it should be called 1M1P. Like how the 4-hour work week is.
That's actually, that's very efficient. I love that. I should have that
so
URL.
It'll become part of our lexicon, and then that would be amazing. Elaine, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Darren. Well, this was fun. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening, and if you enjoyed that episode, press subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. It helps more people discover the show. I sincerely appreciate it, and if you want to join the conversation and get some goodies, get on our email list, go head over to upstartist.tv/ACE. That's ASE, and I hope to see you there.